I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's bonus episode. So excited to talk to you. And yes, we watched the debate. Thank you to everyone who hung out in the chat room on Patreon, where we saw through all of the nonsense over that really disgusting debate. I'll get into that in a second. The opening clip that you heard was from President Biden's rally on Friday, June 28th in North Carolina, showing a very different Biden. But before we get into the debate, and I have a lot to say on that, but let me just remind everyone, big date switch. We are having the live taping with the cult expert, Dr. Janja Lalich, on July 11. That's Thursday, July 11 at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's not the 15th, but July 11th, with cult expert Dr. Janja Lalich preparing us for the MAGA death cult rally known as the Republican National Convention in Wisconsin. And this is really important because we're living in a time of crisis. It's the far-right crisis. The polls in France of Le Pen's party look really strong. So France may be headed towards a Trumpian, pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian government soon, which is devastating on so many levels because under Macron, France has been a leader in fighting Russian fascism. So dark days ahead if that should happen, and should America fall in November to our own far-right, Russian-backed fascist, and so on it goes in the climate crisis. And so in a time of such polarization and instability, people are more vulnerable to cults, to falling down disinformation rabbit holes. And of course, social media companies are completely profit-driven and unchecked, and they're producing all these algorithms to increase your dependency on them and engagement on them, never mind if that leads to deaths by suicide and all sorts of self-harm and contamination of our public space, of the quality of our information, of the suppression of the vote, and so on. So it's a very dangerous time. So to stay grounded, to fact check and pull back the veil on the gaslighting, to find your bearings, to know how to arm yourself in this time where more and more people are susceptible to cults and cult-like thinking. You have the horseshoe theory alive and well, with the far right and the far left sounding pretty much the same in all of their mainstream media outlets, and even like their so-called independent media that's really backed by the PayPal mafia, Peter Thiel, and so on. So we can go into more of those bad actors as we get closer to the election. But I just want to say for now, it's so important to educate ourselves on how cults operate, especially now, especially in this election. And that's why Dr. Janja Lalich is coming on the show for a special live taping with us on July 11th, not 15th, the 11th. It's a Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Come drop questions in the chat. We'll then publish the recording soon after that. So Dr. Janja Lalich is the author of several books on cults and understanding how they operate and how to help people impacted by them, including Take Back Your Life and Bounded Choice. She's also the founder of the nonprofit, the Lalich Center on Cults and Coercion. You can find more about her at lalichcenter.org, which I'll link to in the show notes. And if you want to join that live taping, make sure you're subscribed to Gaslit Nation on Patreon at the truth teller level or higher. We have annual discounts for you, so you can stay with us for future events and hangouts as the year goes on and we get closer to the election that we must absolutely dominate, because we have to hold the line in 2024, just hold the damn line. And then in 2028, we elect a reformer, either Elizabeth Warren or somebody who came up in her orbit. A lot of Elizabeth Warren people are doing some amazing things for government. We are going to highlight some of their stories. So we try to build a movement to get a real FDR-style reformer elected in 2028. So our big priority now is to hold the line in 2024 for the White House and to plant so many seeds of change, including going into red states, as we're already doing with our monthly phone banks with Indivisible. Thank you to everyone who comes out to those. And we've got more. We're going to be phone banking with our friends at Sister District every Wednesday in October to get out the vote in all the key battleground states, but not for Biden, for state officials. We're protecting the state governments and expanding our power on the state level because this election is bigger than Biden. That's what people have to understand. The horror that is coming out of the Supreme Court right now, the horror that's coming out in these Republican hostage states is because Republicans for decades have been playing this long game and there's been no answer for it. And yes, some Democrats, of course, have been complicit. But the point of the matter is it's up to us now to play this long game and push back and fight back and build our political power, because there's no alternative to political power. There's no alternative to building and expanding our power. That's the only way we get out of this and overcome it and build a sustainable future for all. And that is what we're going to do. Now let's talk about this bullshit debate on Thursday. I want to say the very existence of this debate was the problem to begin with. It was the original sin. This was sick. This whole thing felt like watching a Black Mirror episode. And it just spoke to how deeply and intentionally our society has been dumbed down, including cable news. There's a reason why the far right for decades have attacked the entire school system, has worked so hard to defund public schools, has worked so hard to put the Bible, the 10 Commandments, and creationism, that planet Earth was made in 6,000 years by a white Jesus or whatever. Like, there's a reason why they've been doing this, to dumb people down. So when they watch a debate and one man is pale as hell and squinting and trying to speak in policy talk, and yes, having trouble with his words because he's told us before, including in very heartfelt ways, he's had a stutter that he's had to overcome. And plus, yes, he's old. Yes, he's old. Okay. But he still has more stamina than I do. That's for damn sure. I watched this debate beached on my couch, exhausted from a hard day of momming and working and thinking, damn, Biden has more energy than I do. What is my excuse here? But anyway, I digress. But my point is the whole debate was yucky. It just felt gross watching it. And like Jake Tapper and Dana Bash are some of the worst anchors we have on TV. You know Jake Tapper's whole story. Like, I've gone off on him over the years. Like, he was my sister's neighbor. My sister warned him about what the Russians were doing back in 2016. He could give a fuck. Until some kid drove up from North Carolina and went into Jake Tapper's pizza place and shot it up, all driven by a Pizzagate, by Michael Flynn's Pizzagate, right? So that's when Jake Tapper started to realize, oh my gosh, there's something here. There's fascism coming for us, because it affected me finally. Anyway, so Jake Tapper sucks, Dana Bash sucks. This was all bread and circus. It was all show. This debate should never have happened without, bare minimum, live fact checking as we were going on. Trump was allowed to just spew lie after lie after lie, attack Biden's son, Hunter, who was suffering from an addiction when he committed a crime that has had an extreme reaction by law enforcement that typically wouldn't be done for a private citizen. And yet Trump's own kids escaped indictments because they paid off the DA. That was Cy Vance Jr., the Manhattan DA. I'll link to that story in the show notes. And then Trump's own children enriched themselves massively when they were in the White House, leaving with $2 billion from the Saudis, and they haven't been investigated. So Trump's own children are criminals that are the worst of the kleptocrats that plague countries like Ukraine and Russia and so on. And not only that, Trump was up there spewing Russian disinformation, and nobody in the press that I saw called him out on it. He full on just casually said that Ukraine's weak, Ukraine's losing this war. Well, who helped that happen? You did, Trump, intentionally by having your MAGA attack dogs in the House deliberately block aid for 6 critical months. And so many innocent people died in that time. And yes, Russia, your friends, your financial backers for decades were able to get the advantage on the battlefield and slaughter civilians and slaughter critical infrastructure. Now there's like rolling blackouts across the whole country and so on. And Trump, is like, yeah, Ukraine, it's like it's a lost cause. It's not a lost cause. Despite all your best efforts, Trump, Ukrainians are pushing back against the Russians, even though the Russians have been able to open an all-new front in Kharkiv. And they're still fighting back and pushing back and regaining their footing there after all you try to do to them. And you're up on stage spreading that Russian disinformation. You should be in prison a million times over. This whole debate was sickening. It should not have happened. It was an assault on America. It was an assault on our children who had to watch this with us going, what the fuck are we inheriting? It was a nightmare. And I just felt I had the worst migraine watching this. I had to go to bed like right after. So I feel sorry for anyone that had to watch this and go through this. It was just a Black Mirror episode for all of us. Biden's whole performance, I think ultimately he's going to eke through in November if we fight like hell for it, of course, because we have to hold the line. We have to hold the line. We have to work towards greater things. We have to fight urgently now to take the long view. We cannot surrender this. We have to think strategically now, no matter what, no matter how dark these days get, no matter how many more bad debate performances we have. We have one more in September. But the reality is this: Hillary Clinton dominated Trump, swiped the floor and her ass with him in the debates in 2016, and she still lost the election. Elizabeth Warren became a superstar through her debates in the 2020 Democratic primaries. She dog-walked billionaire Michael Bloomberg for all to see across that stage, and she still lost the primary. Biden will be just fine because he's a white man, and white men in America fail upwards. Look at Trump, look at Biden. They're still in the race. So Biden will be fine. I'm not worried about one bad debate performance. And I want to share why, because I've made thousands of phone calls into all of these swing states over the years. And I've talked to independent voters, I've talked to Republicans, and they've read enough history on Germany under Hitler to know that Trump has to lose, that we all have to band together to make sure this guy is finally defeated. I want to just sum up this point by playing this clip of a swing voter in Pennsylvania being interviewed on Meet the Press, and this guy sums it up for all of us.
If it's a Biden and Trump race, then I would vote for Biden, even if he was dead.
No chance I'd stay home.
And I'm a Republican.
But I want to add to this, because one thing that people forget from this debate performance, right, is that Biden, the leader of the free world, who has literally the hardest job on this planet, he is leading the global Democratic alliance against Russia's fascist existential invasion of Ukraine that is backed by all the autocrats, China, Iran, North Korea, you name it. He's leading that alliance. He woke up sleepy Europe. He woke up Russian gas-addicted Europe and like Germany to lead that alliance, to scramble there. He has been negotiating a ceasefire between two terrorist genocidal forces, Netanyahu's government versus Hamas, and trying to negotiate a hostage deal. He's been leading one of the strongest economic rebounds during a time of global inflation, recovering from job losses from a once-in-a-century pandemic. We were so crushed. We were like an injured bird coming out of the Trump regime, and Biden resuscitated us. I know it wasn't all perfect, but he did a lot of landmark legislation, like protecting gay marriage, from passing major climate legislation with the infrastructure package. If you talk to climate activists, they say, what Biden did, of course, it's not enough, but it's still historic. It's one of the biggest things that we've ever had for climate ever in the US. And it's creating so many green jobs across this country, especially in Republican hostage states where they're taking credit for all this. And on it goes. And he's also been the most pro-labor president we've ever had. And you're seeing a big resurgence of all of these unions. And he's been a big promoter of that. He has Elizabeth Warren protege, Leah Khan, taking on monopolies, and so on it goes. He has the hardest job in the world. And he took some time out of his packed schedule to get on a stage with Trump, who doesn't even have a real job. Like, what does Trump do all day? He hangs out in Florida by the beach, scamming people for money so he can like enrich himself and throw money at his lawyers to keep him out of prison. Like, what does Trump do all day? So Trump appears on that stage, all well rested, to debate the guy with the busiest packed schedule on this planet. And we're all like, oh, you didn't entertain us enough, Biden. You should have been tap dancing for your supper. Like, I'm sorry, this was like a sick joke that we all had to witness. First of all, Trump shouldn't even be running for president. He should have been in prison a long time ago. And that's Biden's doing for having Merrick Garland, keeping him as head of the DOJ. A lot of good that's done our country, right? Because children are watching this saying like, wait, that creep is still walking around. Why isn't he in trouble? I get in trouble for everything. Why isn't that guy in prison? Anyway, so the whole thing was a scam on America. I'm sorry we all had to go through it. It wasn't right. And I want to now turn to the larger, darker story of this past week, which of course is the Supreme Court, the dictatorship court. The Catholic, far-right, Christian nationalist majority of the court every year for the past 3 years has completely uprooted some major presidents every year for the past 3 years. It was Roe v. Wade, reproductive health care rights in 2022. In 2023, it was affirmative action. And now in 2024, it's the power of administrative agencies in the big Chevron ruling, which now will unleash a storm of corporate lawsuits to roll back life-saving regulations, impede environmental protections like for clean water, clean air, and prevent agencies from regulating stuff like AI and social media. Not that they're really doing much to begin with, but still, what this latest ruling did, and I'll link to some reporting on it in the show notes, what this latest ruling did is basically establish the Christian nationalist mullahs on the Supreme Court as a dictatorship, saying it's the courts that get to decide, not the agencies. And this is so extraordinarily dangerous. It's up there with Citizens United level of danger. It's going to flood our country with unchecked greed and corruption. And I'm very scared about this. This was really the thing that broke my heart this week, not the silliness and the disgustingness of the stupid debate, but what the Supreme Court is doing, because the Republicans have had a very clever long game. As I've been saying on this show for years, and as I said in the Gaslit Nation graphic novel, the courts are the cage bars of every dictatorship. Hitler knew that. One of the first things he did when he came to power was attack the courts, attack the judiciary, and that's how he established his dictatorship so quickly. The Republicans played that same game with the Federalist Society, taking over our courts, helping bring Trump to power, helping Trump pack the courts with 30% of our courts now ideologues, including the Supreme Court, which is now an illegitimate court that must be expanded for the sake of our very lives, because they will be allowed to even further poison us, all the corporations that buy them fancy hunting trips and yacht trips and pay for their kids' schools, as like Clarence Thomas is cleaning up with all the money he's getting. You know, pig at the trough. Just like my film, Mr. Jones, opens with pigs at the trough, because that's what they do, right? As they say in Ukraine, we're the shit they grow their money in. That's what this is about. You think it's bad now? This latest ruling this week is going to make it so much worse. It's going to be on acid, forest fire, steroids, just infinitely worse. And there's nowhere to go, because our bad air travels, our bad water travels, because we're all connected. And I'm sorry to the rest of the world. We Americans are fighting so hard to stop this, because if we don't, if we just get demoralized, that right there is voter suppression. If we get demoralized, if we give up, if we just say both sides are the same, everyone's corrupt, if we fall victim to that, I mean, that's morally criminal, I think. If we don't fight for our country, it's like the Russian opposition being worthless. I don't want to be like the Russian opposition. I want to fight. I don't want anyone ever to say about the American opposition, they gave in to nihilism. They gave up. They just became decadent and hedonistic while the world burned. No, we're fighting like hell for a livable, sustainable future for all. We're not giving up. We're being strategic. We're fighting like hell. We're being urgent in the short term, and we're keeping our eye on the long term. Okay, we have our goals. We highlight them here on the show all the time. We have our actions that are deeply organized and well-planned that we take in order to fight with urgency today and play the long game, because we ultimately have to prevail. We have no choice, not just for us here at home, but the rest of the planet, because what happens in America affects the whole world. All right, everyone. So we're going to get to our main bonus episode. It is the audience Q&A from our live taping with the investigative journalist Craig Unger, the author of several international best-selling books, including House of Bush, House of Saud, House of Trump, House of Putin, and American Compromise, all about the Jeffrey Epstein pedophile syndicate and where the Russians and Trump and everyone fits in and what to do about it. This is a wonderful Q&A led by Gaslit Nation listeners in our community that keep the show going on Patreon. If you want to hear the full episode of this full bonus show, make sure you subscribe to the show at the Truth Teller level or higher on patreon.com/gaslit. And to our subscribers on Patreon at the Democracy Defender level or higher, get ready for a big old Q&A coming your way. That is going to be on July 13, a Saturday morning. So get your questions into me by Thursday, July 11th, the same day as our live taping with the cult expert, Dr. Janja Lalich. That is your deadline to get me all of your questions for the next Q&A. I'm going to be sinking my teeth into your questions and publishing that Q&A, big old episode for our Democracy Defender level supporters and higher on Saturday, July 13th. I'm going to get your questions answered. I'm so excited. I love hearing from you. You guys ask the most fascinating questions and you really shape the show and get me thinking and get me reading and have sent me on so many interesting intellectual journeys. Thank you so much. I love hearing from you. So if you want to hear this full episode, make sure you're subscribed to Gaslit Nation at patreon.com/gaslit.
How about the fact that 40 out of his 44 top advisors, including the vice president, aren't supporting him this time around? The people who know him best, 40 of them said, I will not support the man I work for this time around. It tells you a lot about the person who knows him. Look, he lied about how great he was on crime. I had to remind him that he oversaw a record increase in murder rates in 2020. On my watch, violent crime has hit a 50-year low. There's more to do with a 50-year low. And then I pointed out that the only convicted criminal on the stage last night was Donald Trump. When I thought about his 34 felony convictions, his sexual assault on a woman in a public place, his being fined $400 million for business fraud, I thought to myself, Donald Trump isn't just a convicted felon. Donald Trump is a one-man crime wave. And he's got more trials. He's got more trials coming up. Well, time for that.